Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is TDT, the Developing Trader, coming back at you again with another video. So we're popping in here today to take a look at our midweek check-in, see what has transpired in these assets that we are watching. So let's jump right into Dixie here and take a look. So on Sunday when I released that video, we were at this area. Price had dived down into this liquidity below right here. And I told you guys this week I think it would kind of retrace back into this gap. You see it's already gone through that gap. And if you look at the weekly really quick, I want you to see which area I am looking at to see if price has the ability to trade back to. That is this area right here. There's a little gap in here. I want to see if price wants to reach into that before continuing this fall here. Let's look at that on the daily. So with that weekly gap sitting above here on our last weekly projection, we were here and I was saying price may want to come in here and do some consolidations, which it is doing. I want to see if it has enough strength to reach up further and reach for that gap, reaching into some of these inversion gaps that you see here in this porous price action right here. So I want to see what price does as it moves into these areas, if it has the strength to do so. If it turns around and doesn't reach into these areas and it falls back, I want to look at this gap below that has been created here to see if price may want to reach in and then reach up here, or if it wants to go straight up and then it may return back into this area in price. So I'm looking for it to stretch up at the end of this week. We want to see if it does that. It may drop below and swipe it below these two. This is Tuesday's price. I wouldn't be surprised if price wants to come in and sweep that before heading up. So that's what we're going to be looking at for the rest of the week in Dixie. Okay, now let's jump into the S&P 500 here. Bam, on a weekly chart. Let's see, we're still kind of sitting in this weekly gap. I want to see a break of these gaps on these higher time frames, like I was telling you guys on the weekend. Price, it keeps wicking into these gaps, and yeah, it did wick below it, but the bodies are staying above this gap. Look at the respect on the bodies on these gaps. So if price goes below this, right, on a closing basis, and then it returns back into something like that, that would be something I would watch for a longer hold going into further decline. But as long as we stay on top of it, I'm just watching it and seeing how we interact with that gap. Okay, it looks like it really wants to reach into this liquidity below here. That would be our next stop right down here if the bearish action does continue this week. And if we moved into that area, I would then start looking at these gaps that are below these liquidity zones below that it tapped into back in December. There's another gap here that price may want to interact with on the downside. Okay, so we're going to monitor that. Right now we're below this, I want to call it a void because there are no bodies, but you know, you may not consider that a void. I'm looking at it as a void that there's no bodies, all wicks in there. I'm talking about right here between that wick, right there between that wick, and you see price is still respecting that right there. So that's giving me some hints, you know, but price is just very scattered, very wicky, as I keep saying. That's why it's been a hard read all January, as it sits in this gap here, and you can see price just keeps reaching in, pulling back, reaching in, pulling back, and here we are reaching in again, but not going through and taking that liquidity. So let's take a look. I believe that going into the end of this week, as Dixie rises up into that weekly gap, if it does that, this may extend its hand below. Going into tomorrow, if this closes back up in this gap, I want to see what happens tomorrow, as we might reach down and still extend to the high side. So we're going to watch that intraday here on S&P. Let's jump into NASDAQ real quick. So we finally taken some liquidity on the downside here on NASDAQ. Like I was saying the other day, price has not broken price structure here. It still hasn't broken on a closing basis. If we do need to move further lower this week, I am eyeballing this area and price that's below. There may be a bounce where it reaches in and may bounce back into an area here that can give a few setups for maybe a few days, even if price remains bearish moving further into this liquidity down low here. Okay, so I'm not calling for that fall as yet, but we're still watching. We did get a lot of bearish action going into this week. Remember this gap we were talking about, so price goes into that gap, respects that gap, and we get our sell off right out of that gap that we were talking about on the weekend. So I want you guys to just monitor these things, take note of it. Look how many of these price structures are repeating right at the consequent encroachment of that gap. I included this here because of the gap right there in the bodies. That's the reason I'm including that there. And in some cases there's a gap right here as well, so you could extend that here, right? But I don't want to make it too confusing, guys. These are just different ways that I measure these gaps to see how price is responding in that area. I know it may seem a little complicated, but once you do it for a while, you get kind of a read on what it's doing at these different times. So liquidity taken here. Let's see if tomorrow we kind of move back into this area, and then we may have another sell-off going into Friday, or this may be all it's looking for. We may have a recovery moving into this week. I do believe price wants to get down here. It's reaching in. So we'll see if we get a close below this liquidity, a close of a candle, and then we'll see where we're headed from there. And that's what I'll be watching for the rest of this week. So I hope you guys are having a great week as always. I hope you are protecting your capital. It's a very wicky market. There's a lot of risk right now out there. I want you to just be very mindful of the trades that you're taking. Try your best not to overtrade. Keep a calm mind. There are so many opportunities that are out there. There's no need to blow your load on one trade, guys, okay? So that's going to be me for the midweek check-in. I hope you guys have been enjoying these videos. I'll try to keep them going, and you guys have a blessed one, okay? That's TDT, the Developing Trader, out. Peace.